dinner table was quiet, the faint clink of silverware the only sound between us. I glanced across at Isabella, her features serene, almost glowing under the soft light. Moments like these felt like anchors, a reminder of the stability we'd built together. She was my rock, my confidant, the person who knew me better than I knew myself. So when she spoke, her words landed like thunder in a still sky. I think we should get a divorce. For a second, I thought I misheard her. What? I set my fork down, my appetite instantly gone. Not a real one, she said quickly, her tone maddeningly calm, as if this was just another suggestion to change the curtains or rearrange the living room. A fake divorce. The air seemed to shift, thickening around me. What the hell are you talking about? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She leaned forward slightly, her fingers lightly grazing the edge of her wineglass. It's for Lucas. You know, his custody battle has been a nightmare. If we pretend to divorce and I align myself with him as a supportive family figure, it could sway the court in his favor. He needs this, Daniel. I blinked, trying to process her words, but they only tangled together in my mind. So, you want me to stage a divorce with you for Lucas? Yes. Her eyes softened, her expression imploring. It's temporary. A few months, maybe less, just until the case is resolved. It's not about us. It's about helping him. A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. And about us? Isabella, how can you say that? You're asking me to turn our marriage into some performance piece, and I'm supposed to be okay with that? She sighed, her shoulders dropping slightly. I'm not doing this lightly, Daniel. Lucas is desperate. He's our friend. I thought you'd understand. Understand? I pushed back my chair, standing abruptly. What I understand is that you're willing to put our marriage on the line for someone else. Do you even see what you're asking me to do? Her gaze didn't waver. I see it, she said quietly, and I wouldn't ask if I didn't think it was the right thing to do. This isn't just about Lucas. It's about doing something selfless, something good. Her words hit me like a slap. Selfless? Good? Was I the selfish one for hesitating? The thought twisted inside me, but so did something darker. Doubt. I looked at her, searching for some crack in her calm, some sign that this was as hard for her as it was for me. But she seemed resolute, certain. I need time to think, I muttered, retreating from the table before I said something I'd regret. Later that night, I sat alone in the study, the divorce papers spread out before me. The pen felt heavy in my hand, as if it knew what this signature would. Could I trust her? Could I trust myself to do this and not lose her in the process? Her voice from earlier echoed in my head. It's temporary. It's for Lucas. But what if it wasn't? What if this was the first step in unraveling everything we'd built? My hand trembled as I pressed the pen to the paper. Each stroke felt like carving away at my own foundation. When it was done, I stared at my signature. My chest tight and my thoughts racing. I'd agreed to her plan, but deep down I knew nothing about this felt fake. And everything about it felt like the beginning of the end. The apartment felt too quiet, too still. Even the faint hum of the refrigerator seemed louder than usual, pressing down on me. She was here, I knew that, but it didn't feel like she was. Isabella had been distant lately, more so than usual. We shared a home, but we didn't share a life anymore. The conversations were curt, the touches brief, and the air between us thick with unspoken words. I set my glass down with a soft clink on the counter, staring at the empty room. She was out again, spending time with Lucas, supposedly to help him with his case, but it felt different now. I remembered the little things. Those subtle changes, how she used to greet me at the door, the way her smile used to light up the room when she talked about us. Now, it was all forced, distant. Daniel, she said, as if pulling herself back from a daze. Lucas needs me. You understand that, right? I nodded, but it was empty. I understood the words, but not the weight behind them. There was something hollow in her voice. Something that didn't sit right with me. Just a few more weeks, she continued, her gaze steady. After that, it'll go back to normal. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something in her eyes told me that normal was just a word now. Lucas wasn't stupid. He knew how to play the game. At first, his words were casual, almost complimentary. You're lucky, Daniel, he'd say with a knowing smile, to have someone like her. It was a compliment, yes, but it wasn't just that. There was something behind it, a hint, a reminder of a past that I hadn't noticed until now. His admiration for Isabella had never been a secret, but it felt heavier when he said it like that. She's loyal, he'd add, more than you give her credit for. It stung, but I brushed it off. I told myself I was overthinking it. Lucas was just Lucas, a friend who'd been through a lot, someone who leaned on Isabella because she was the kind of person who couldn't walk away from someone in need. Still, the doubt gnawed at me. Every offhand remark, every lingering glance she gave him, it all built into something I couldn't ignore anymore. One evening, I followed her. A whisper of instinct tugged at my mind, and before I knew it, I was parked a few streets away from Lucas's apartment. I watched as she entered without a second thought, the door closing softly behind her. My breath hitched. I should have walked away, turned around, but I couldn't move. I couldn't stop watching, the way my heart shattered in my chest with every second that passed. Minutes felt like hours. I sat there, helpless, until I saw him step into view. Lucas, behind her, his arms casually resting on her shoulders as they laughed softly. I couldn't breathe. The air in the car felt suffocating, thick with pain and betrayal. When they finally separated, Isabella stepped into the dimly lit apartment, her face calm, but something was different. It wasn't her usual peace. There was a weight there. Something I couldn't shake. When she returned that night, I was waiting for her. "You went to him?" I said, my voice low, steady. Her eyes widened, but only slightly. "I was helping him, you know that." "I saw you," I shot back, unable to contain the flood of emotions. "Lucas was there, you were with him." "Daniel, it's not what you think." But it was too late. Her words, her calm explanations, they couldn't erase what I had seen. The distance between us was no longer an absence. It was a chasm. "I trusted you," I whispered, feeling the weight of those words like a chain around my soul. "And you threw it all away for him." Her gaze fell, and for the first time, I saw her hesitate. But it wasn't enough. "I need time," I said finally, my voice steady with finality. And as I walked away, I knew that there was no going back. The phone buzzed on the nightstand. I barely glanced at it, my mind too weighed down with thoughts of what wasn't being said, what wasn't being done. I knew it was hers, though. I knew it before I even saw her name light up the screen. Curiosity tugged at me like a shadow, but I held back for a moment. Then, my fingers moved on their own, sliding the lock open. The message stood there, bold against the screen. "Always grateful for you. Lucas." The words hit harder than they should have. Beneath them, a second message. "You've been my rock through everything." I let the phone drop onto the bed, my chest tightening with each beat of my heart. The air felt cold, my throat tightened, and for a second I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just the words, it was the way they lingered, like a wound freshly reopened. She'd always said it was nothing. Lucas was just someone she'd helped through rough patches. But these messages, they were different. I thought back to all the moments I'd dismissed, the compliments Lucas had given her, the way she'd listen a little too intently when he spoke. They had felt harmless then. Now those memories replayed, sharper than before. "Daniel," she said when I confronted her later that evening, her voice steady but distant, "it's not what it looks like." "Isn't it?" I snapped, unable to hide the anger simmering beneath my skin. "You and Lucas, those messages, those nights you spend away." "I'm helping him," she said, her tone soft, almost pleading. "He needs me, you know that." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust that what we had was real, but doubt clawed at me. "Helping him? Or are you getting lost in something else?" Her gaze dropped, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of hesitation. She was trying to hold it together, but something inside her was unraveling too. The nights alone became unbearable. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with questions, with fears I couldn't voice. She'd say she was helping Lucas with legal documents or offering support, but the weight of her absence grew heavier with each passing day. She wasn't just physically gone, her heart seemed distant too, guarded. And I wondered if I'd ever reach her again. One night, after countless hours of waiting, I heard the front door open softly. My breath hitched as I listened for the faintest sound of her returning. "You're late," I said, my voice calm but brittle. "I lost track of time," she replied, her voice quick like it was rehearsed. I shook my head. "Every night, Isabella. Every night, a new excuse." Her silence was the worst part. She didn't argue, didn't fight back, she simply accepted my disappointment, and that silence hurt more than any argument could. The distance between us felt like a chasm, impossible to cross, impossible to heal. Every word felt hollow, every touch empty. She was slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. All I had were questions and no answers. The streets were quiet, shadows stretching long in the dim streetlights. My steps echoed softly on the pavement, but they didn't seem to matter. Everything inside me was louder. The pounding of my heart, the rush of thoughts spinning out of control. I had to know. I had to see for myself. I told myself I wasn't desperate, but every nerve in my body screamed otherwise. Following her was a risk, a betrayal of trust I couldn't take back, but I couldn't stand the not knowing. The uncertainty was worse than any lie. I kept a safe distance, watching her from behind the parked cars and flickering streetlights. She walked with a calmness I didn't recognize. Her movements deliberate. There was no rush, no hesitation. It was like she had done this 100 times before. The apartment loomed ahead, familiar and distant all at once. My breath caught in my throat as she rang the doorbell, her hand steady, her expression unreadable. I wanted to turn away, to leave, but my feet wouldn't move. The door opened and I saw him, Lucas. His smile was easy, almost too familiar. He said something, but I couldn't hear the words. All I could see was their closeness, the way her hand brushed his lightly as she stepped inside. I stood there, frozen, watching them disappear behind the closed door. The world around me seemed hollow, stripped of sound. My chest burned with anger, confusion, betrayal. I wanted to confront them both, to scream at the unfairness of it all, but my voice felt stuck in my throat. The minutes passed like hours. Time warped into something unbearable, something I couldn't escape. Every second felt like a dagger, each memory flashing sharper and clearer, the subtle signs, the lies I had let slide, the distance between us growing wider with every passing moment. Finally, she emerged, but it wasn't just her. He followed her out, their voices low, but every word felt like a slap in the dark. Slap. She saw me then, her face twisting in surprise, then confusion. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice strained. "Is this what it's come to?" I managed to force out, my voice trembling. "Following you?" Lucas stepped between us, a smirk playing on his lips, a knowing look in his eyes. "She doesn't owe you explanations, Daniel." That twisted something deep inside me. "She owes me everything." I snapped back, my voice sharp, cutting through the tense air like glass. They stood there, silent, neither denying nor confirming, just two people caught in a moment of unbearable truth, and I was the fool left to pick up the pieces. "I need answers," I said, my voice low, shaking with emotion. "And I won't leave until I get them." Another stretch of silence, heavy and suffocating. The night felt endless, dragging us deeper into the unknown. Finally, she spoke, her voice fragile yet steady. "There's nothing left to say, Daniel." But her words did nothing to ease the storm inside me. The truth was staring me in the face, undeniable, and yet I couldn't accept it. I stood there, breathless, unsure of what to do next. As their world continued behind that door, closed, locked, and untouchable. The door slammed behind me with a force I hadn't intended, but the weight of everything, the years of doubt and lies, pushed me beyond control. I stepped into the room, my breath sharp, my fists clenched at my sides. They were there, her standing frozen, and him leaning casually against the edge of the couch, a smug expression on his face. Silence stretched thin, suffocating. Couldn't take it anymore. "You lied," I said, my voice hoarse. "All these months you've been lying." Isabella's eyes widened slightly, but her calm facade quickly returned. "I was trying to help him," she said softly. "It wasn't personal." "Trying to help?" I scoffed. "By destroying everything we had?" Lucas shifted slightly, his gaze flicking between us. "She never encouraged me," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "You're the one who let her down. You were never there when she needed you." Those words hit harder than any blow. My fists trembled at my sides as I tried to process what I was hearing. "Needed? You think I didn't see? The way you looked at her, the way you tried to fill every gap I left?" "I didn't ask for her help," Lucas snapped back. "She offered, unlike you, who only cared about what you could control." Isabella shifted uncomfortably, her gaze dropping briefly. "This isn't about blame," she said, her voice shaking. "It was never about that. I wanted to help him because I thought—" "Because you thought what?" I interrupted. "That he'd love you for it? That being his savior would fill the void I left?" She flinched, her defenses momentarily dropping. Lucas stepped closer to her, his arm brushing hers. "You don't get it, do you? His voice was softer now, almost pleading. You were never enough for her, Daniel. You held her back, tried to box her in, but she's not the woman who fits in your little perfect world. The words twisted inside me, tearing at something fragile and raw. I felt my heart beating louder, faster. Every accusation against my worth struck like shrapnel. Is that what you really believe? I whispered, my voice cracking. That I never loved her enough? That I never saw her? Isabella looked at me then, her eyes filled with a sadness I couldn't quite comprehend. You saw what you wanted to see, she said softly. Not who I really was. My chest tightened, the air leaving me in short, desperate breaths. The weight of it all pressed down harder, memories of moments I thought were real, of love I thought was unbreakable, but the truth was staring back at me in pieces. I gave you everything, I said, my voice a hoarse whisper. Every piece of me. And you took, she countered, you took my freedom, my space, my trust. I tried to protect you, I shouted, the emotion spilling over. Tried to build something solid, something we both wanted. Protect? Lucas interjected again, his voice cutting through the rising tension. You don't protect someone by locking them away. Isabella's shoulders sagged, her gaze fixed on the floor. He was never supposed to get this far, she said softly. But we lost ourselves along the way, Daniel. I didn't lose you, I argued. You left. The room was silent once more. The weight of the truth hung heavy between us, unbearable and undeniable. Lucas and Isabella, their defenses down, faced the fallout of their actions, and I, the outsider to my own life, stood in the middle of it all. I just wanted to know the truth, I whispered, my voice breaking. That's all. And now you have it, she replied, her voice gentle but firm. You can do whatever you need to do with it. I wanted to scream, to hit something, to run away and never look back. But all I could do was breathe, shallow, ragged breaths as the world around me felt like it was falling apart. I don't know who I am anymore, I admitted, the vulnerability in my voice stark against the tense silence. Hey, Isabella's eyes met mine again, her expression softer now. Maybe that's the first step, she said quietly, to rediscovering yourself. The room felt cold, distant, and as I stood there, I realized the only thing I could control now was how I moved forward. Everything else was beyond my grasp. The room was suffocating. Every word she said felt like a dagger, cutting deeper into something I had tried to hold together for so long. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think beyond the ache pounding in my chest. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. I never meant to hurt you, she said, her eyes downcast. But Lucas, he gave me something I didn't even realize I needed. Need. The word echoed, hollow and sharp. My mind froze on it, unable to process the depth of what she had just admitted. I was lost, she continued. You were there, but not really. You were there in the way you thought you should be, not in the way I needed you to be. The air between us thickened. Her confession hung in the space like a heavy weight, pressing down on me until I couldn't stand it any longer. How could you? I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible after everything we'd built, everything we shared. I thought I was doing what was best, she said quietly, her voice breaking slightly. I felt helping him get through something I thought you couldn't. The betrayal felt like a tidal wave, swallowing me whole. How could I compete with that? With the hollow spaces I had tried to fill, but had never managed to. The silence that followed was unbearable. I felt my world crumbling beneath me, the foundation of our shared history crumbling to dust. I can't do this anymore, I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. You've already shattered everything. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine, but there was no defense left in them, only resignation. Then leave, she said softly. The weight of her permission was like a final blow. I stood there for a moment, staring at her, knowing that there was nothing left to say. Turning away, I walked towards the door, every step a burden too heavy to bear. The pieces of what we once had were left behind, broken and scattered, beyond repair. The silence in the house was deafening as I walked into our once-in space. It was too quiet now. The memories of laughter and comfort felt distant, a distant echo of something long gone. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the divorce papers on the nightstand, a stark reminder of where we had ended up. My hands trembled slightly as I picked them up, my reflection staring back at me from the still surface of the glass. It had all been a lie, Had I been clinging to something that never truly existed? The emptiness felt unbearable, my heart weighed down by the weight of what we had lost and the realization that there was no going back. The house was eerily quiet. The silence pressed down on me like a heavy weight, a constant reminder of what had been lost. I stood in the doorway, staring at the emptiness around me. The walls, once filled with laughter and warmth, now seemed hollow, devoid of life. I moved slowly through the rooms, touching the furniture as if to see if they still held any remnants of what we once had. The memories stung more than I anticipated. They were like shadows, flickering images of moments shared, now distant and unreachable. Betrayal had a way of seeping into everything. It clung to the air, to the spaces we once occupied together. I sat down in the middle of the living room, my hands trembling slightly. There were no words to describe the ache that settled deep within my chest. This wasn't just about losing a partner, it was losing a part of myself. A part I had given freely, thinking it would be cherished, protected. Now, it was shattered. But the emptiness wasn't going to define me. I couldn't let it consume me. I knew I needed to take steps forward, even if they were small. A friend had suggested therapy, an idea I had dismissed at first. But sitting there, amidst the quiet, I realized how necessary it might be. "Why don't you try?" she had asked, her voice gentle. "You've been through a lot. You deserve to understand what you went through." I made the call the next day. Sitting in a therapist's office for the first time was intimidating. The room was simple, a stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. I spoke about everything, how it had started, where it had gone wrong, and the moments of doubt and pain that followed. "I thought I knew who I was," I said, my voice cracking. "But now, I don't know if I ever truly did." The therapist nodded, her gaze steady. That's the first step," she said softly. "Understanding that loss is part of healing, and so is self-discovery." Each session brought a bit more clarity. I wasn't just the victim in this story. I had played a part in its unraveling too. I had lost myself in the midst of trying to hold on to something that wasn't sustainable. Gradually, I began to see my own role in the cracks of our relationship. It wasn't just about betrayal. It was about two people drifting apart, unable to find each other again. The more I talked, the more I understood. It wasn't about blame. It was about growth. Weeks passed, and with every session I felt lighter. The weight wasn't completely gone, but it no longer felt suffocating. I found moments of peace, even when the memories threatened to pull me under. In those moments, I turned to things I had once loved. Painting, hiking, writing. They weren't just hobbies anymore, they were lifelines. They reminded me of who I was, of what I could still create and cherish. Painting became my therapy, each brushstroke a step toward healing. The colors mixed and blurred, just like my emotions, but slowly clarity emerged. One afternoon, as I stood at the edge of a forest trail, the sun filtering through the trees, I took a deep breath. The fresh air filled my lungs, grounding me. The path ahead was uncertain, but in that moment, I felt control. The quiet hum of the world around me was soothing. It wasn't about forgetting. It was about moving forward with understanding. As I walked back to my empty home, the thought crossed my mind. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for something new. Not to replace what was lost, but to build something different. Something real. The news hit me like a cold wave, leaving a sharp, bitter taste in my mouth. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard that Lucas and Isabella's relationship had crumbled. Custody battles lost, accusations flying, and in the end, Isabella had walked away. She'd seen the truth. Lucas, manipulative and self-centered, wasn't what she needed. Part of me felt a strange sense of justice. The kind you don't fully want to acknowledge, but can't quite ignore. Poetic justice, they call it. Lucas, the one who once seemed untouchable, had been brought down. And yet, it wasn't a victory I could fully embrace. There was still a hollow ache. For all his faults, Isabella had once been a part of my life too. The memories we shared weren't so easily erased. I sat in the dim light of my living room, a blank sheet of paper in front of me. The words didn't come easily, but I had to try. An unsent letter, an attempt to lay it all out. "To Isabella," I began. my hand shaking slightly as I wrote. I wrote about the happiness we once knew, the small moments of joy we thought would last forever. I traced the outlines of betrayal, the moments where trust slipped through my fingers like sand. Every word felt heavier, more significant. But it wasn't all anger or sorrow. There were moments of clarity, the realization that sometimes letting go is the only way forward. As I reached the end, my breath caught in my throat. The final words stared back at me. I forgive you. Burning the letter became a ritual, a cathartic act of release. I watched the flames consume the paper, my past reduced to ash. It felt final. The weight lifted, though not entirely. The pain was still there, a dull ache that lingered, but it no longer had a hold on me. A few weeks later, I found myself standing on a quiet trail, the crisp air filling my lungs. The hike was something I used to love, and slowly I was rediscovering it. That's when I met her. Emily. She wasn't like anyone I had expected to meet. Warm, open, and effortlessly kind. Our conversation flowed easily, a comfortable exchange of thoughts and experiences. I love the quiet out here, she said, her voice soothing. It reminds me that the world is still beautiful even when things fall apart. I nodded, a smile forming on my face. It was a simple moment, but a profound one. Emily wasn't trying to fix me or offer quick solutions. She just listened, understood. It felt like stepping into something unfamiliar yet familiar. A healthy connection, rooted in respect and honesty. We walked together, side by side, enjoying the serenity of the outdoors. For the first time in a while, I felt a spark, a sense that maybe, just maybe, there was something new to look forward to. The journey wasn't over, but in that moment, I felt hope. Something real and grounding. The air between Emily and me felt different now, lighter. Our walks through the trails were no longer about filling silence with words, but about understanding the quiet. I had spent so much time lost in my thoughts, weighed down by past regrets and anger, but with her, things felt different. I never thought I'd smile again, I said softly, watching her pick a wildflower. It's been a long time since happiness felt genuine. So, everything all right? She turned to face me, her eyes warm and understanding. It's okay to take time. Healing doesn't happen overnight. And she was right. Every conversation, every laugh was a step forward, a step towards something new. With Emily, I was learning to embrace life again, learning to live beyond the shadows of a broken past. I could feel it. A smile that wasn't forced, one that felt earned. It wasn't the smile of a man trying to escape his pain, but one who had found the strength to acknowledge it and move forward. Still, there were moments when the past would sneak in. Memories of the fake divorce, the betrayal, the shattered trust. It wasn't easy to let go of all of it. But I was trying. Every day, late one evening as the sun dipped below the horizon, I found myself reflecting again. Sitting alone on a bench, the stillness of the world felt comforting. The truth is, I whispered, we hold on to things because it feels safer. But safety isn't always what we need. The pain wasn't gone, but it wasn't consuming me anymore. I had begun to understand that sometimes walking away isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign of growth. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared, my thoughts turned inward, leading me to one final reflection. I used to believe that love meant holding on, no matter how much it hurt. But now I see that love isn't about clinging to something that's already broken. It's about recognizing when it's time to let go. The journey had been difficult, full of twists and turns I didn't expect. But now, sitting there in the quiet, I felt a sense of peace. One I hadn't known in a long time. Emily's voice echoed softly in my mind. You deserve more than just memories of what once was. And in that moment, I believed her.